If your car has been stalling, misfiring, or refusing to start, the culprit might be one small but critical part: the crankshaft position sensor. This little device tracks the exact position of your crankshaft, sending signals to your car's computer, so it knows when to inject fuel and fire the spark plugs. In short, without it, your engine has no rhythm. When the crankshaft sensor starts to fail, things can go downhill fast. From poor fuel economy and rough idling to sudden shutdowns while driving, the symptoms can range from annoying to downright dangerous. In this video, we'll cover the 15 most common bad crankshaft position sensor symptoms. Some of them are subtle, others are impossible to ignore, but all of them can lead to costly repairs if you don't catch them early. And make sure to stick around until the end, because I'll also show you how to test the sensor yourself, how much it costs to replace, and why driving too long with a failing one can leave you stranded. Let's get into it, starting with the first symptom that almost every driver notices sooner or later. Symptom number 1, trouble starting or no start. The first and most common sign of a bad crankshaft position sensor is trouble starting the engine. When you turn the key, the engine may crank for a long time before firing, or in some cases, it won't start at all. That's because the crankshaft sensor is responsible for telling the ECU the exact position of the crankshaft. Without that data, the computer doesn't know when to inject fuel or fire the spark plugs, so the engine just spins without catching. At first, this problem may be intermittent. Your car might start fine in the morning, but give you trouble later in the day. Over time, the failure becomes more consistent until eventually the car refuses to start altogether. Of course, a no-start condition can also be caused by other issues like a weak battery or bad starter. But if your car cranks normally and just won't fire, the crankshaft position sensor is one of the first things you should suspect. Ignoring it will only leave you stranded more often. Symptom number 2, sudden stalling while driving. The second major symptom of a failing crankshaft position sensor is sudden stalling. You could be idling at a stoplight or cruising down the highway when suddenly the engine shuts off without warning. That's because the sensor is no longer sending a stable signal to the ECU. Without accurate crankshaft position data, the computer can't manage spark or fuel delivery, so the engine simply dies. What makes this especially dangerous is how unpredictable it can be. The car might restart right away, or it might refuse to start until the sensor cools down. Either way, stalling in traffic puts both you and other drivers at risk. Many owners describe it as if someone just reached over and turned the key off mid-drive. If your vehicle is stalling randomly with no check engine light, the crankshaft position sensor is often the hidden culprit. Symptom number 3, hot start failures. Another classic crankshaft position sensor symptom is what mechanics call a hot start failure. Here's how it usually happens. You drive your car for a while, park it, and everything seems fine. But when you come back after 10 or 15 minutes, the engine cranks but refuses to start. Then, after sitting and cooling down, it fires up again, like nothing ever happened. This happens because a failing crankshaft sensor can overheat and stop working when the engine is hot. Once it cools off, the sensor begins sending signals again, until the next time it gets heat-soaked. Drivers often mistake this for a fuel pump or ignition issue, but if your car consistently struggles to restart while warm, the crankshaft sensor is a prime suspect. Left unchecked, it usually progresses from an occasional nuisance to a complete failure that leaves you stranded for good. Symptom number 4, check engine light and error codes. One of the earliest warning signs of a crankshaft position sensor problem is the check engine light. When the sensor starts sending weak, erratic, or no signals at all, the ECU can't properly track engine timing. That often triggers fault codes related to misfires, timing errors, or crankshaft position circuit failures. Even if the car seems to run fine, the light is your first clue that something isn't right. The tricky part is that many other issues, like camshaft sensors or ignition coils, can set similar codes. That's why it's important to scan the vehicle with an OBD2 scanner. You don't need an expensive tool. Even an entry-level scanner can tell you if the crankshaft position and sensor is the culprit. If you ignore the light, you risk the problem escalating from a mild inconvenience to a car that stalls, misfires, or refuses to start altogether. When it comes to the check engine light, it always pays to investigate early. Symptom number 5, rough idling and vibrations. A failing crankshaft position sensor can also cause your engine to idle rough. When the sensor feeds inaccurate data to the ECU, the fuel-air mixture and ignition timing fall out of sync. The result is an unstable idle where the RPMs bounce up and down, and the car may feel like it's about to stall even while sitting in park or at a stoplight. In some cases, the roughness doesn't stop at idle. Drivers also report the entire car shaking or vibrating while driving as the engine struggles to maintain smooth power delivery. This isn't just annoying, it's a sign the combustion cycle isn't firing correctly. And over time, it can lead to extra wear on engine components. If you notice your car trembling more than usual, especially combined with other symptoms on this list, the crankshaft position sensor could be the cause. Symptom number 6, misfiring and hesitation. Another giveaway of a bad crankshaft position sensor is engine misfiring. The crank sensor provides the ECU with real-time data on crankshaft position, which determines the exact moment fuel is injected and the spark plug fires. When the sensor starts to fail, that timing gets thrown off. The result? Cylinders may fire late, fire early, or not fire at all. You'll often feel this as hesitation during acceleration, where the car jerks or stumbles instead of pulling smoothly. At higher RPMs, misfires can become more pronounced, making the engine feel weak or inconsistent. Misfires not only reduce performance, but also dump unburned fuel into the exhaust system, which can foul spark plugs, damage oxygen sensors, and eventually ruin your catalytic converter. Ignoring this symptom turns a small sensor problem into a very expensive repair bill. Symptom number 7, poor fuel economy. One symptom many drivers overlook is a sudden drop in fuel efficiency. A healthy crankshaft position. Sensor ensures that the ECU injects the right amount of fuel at the right time. But when the sensor begins to fail, that timing becomes inaccurate. The engine burns more fuel than necessary just to keep running, and your miles per gallon start dropping. At first, it might look like a small dip, maybe 2 or 3 miles per gallon less than usual. But as the problem gets worse, you'll notice yourself filling up more often, even though your driving habits haven't changed. Poor fuel economy on its own could come from other causes like low tire pressure or a dirty air filter. But when combined with misfires, rough idle, or hard starts, it's a strong indicator the crankshaft position sensor isn't doing its job. Symptom number 8, sluggish or delayed acceleration. If your car feels like it's dragging its feet when you hit the gas, a failing crankshaft position sensor could be to blame. The ECU relies on accurate crankshaft data to keep spark timing and fuel injection in perfect sync. When that signal is weak or delayed, there's a noticeable lag between pressing the accelerator and the engine responding. Drivers often describe it as hesitation, sluggishness, or even a momentary dead spot before the car picks up speed. This symptom tends to get worse under heavy load, like when merging onto a highway or climbing a hill. And while other issues like clogged fuel injectors can also cause hesitation, if the problem is paired with misfires or rough idle, the crankshaft position sensor is a likely culprit. Left untreated, the hesitation doesn't just hurt performance. It also stresses the transmission and increases wear on engine components, making the repair bill much bigger down the road. Symptom number 9, erratic RPM readings. Another easy-to-spot sign of a crankshaft position sensor going bad is erratic RPM readings on your tachometer. When the sensor feeds inconsistent signals to the ECU, the engine's actual speed and the data being displayed don't match. You might see sudden spikes, dips, or the needle bouncing around, even when you're holding a steady speed. In some cases, the RPMs may drop to 0 for a split second, as if the engine shut off, even though it's still running. These false readings aren't just a dashboard glitch. They reflect the ECU receiving bad timing information, which directly affects fuel injection and ignition. Over time, this can make the engine stumble, misfire, or stall. If your tachometer seems to have a mind of its own, don't ignore it. Erratic RPM behavior is one of the most direct clues pointing toward a failing crankshaft position sensor. Symptom number 10, unusual exhaust smells. A failing crankshaft position sensor can also lead to unusual exhaust smells. When the sensor isn't sending accurate timing signals, the combustion process inside the engine is thrown off. Fuel doesn't burn completely, and that unburned fuel makes its way into the exhaust system. The result is a strong odor, sometimes like raw gasoline, other times like sulfur or rotten eggs. Not only is this smell unpleasant, it's also a warning sign that the catalytic converter is being stressed. Continuous exposure to unburned fuel can overheat and damage the converter, leading to a repair bill that can easily climb into the thousands. If you notice persistent fuel-like smells from your exhaust, especially combined with poor mileage or rough running, don't ignore it. The crankshaft position sensor could be the hidden cause. Symptom number 11, engine vibrations, rough ride. Another symptom of a failing crankshaft position sensor is excessive engine vibration or a rough ride. When the sensor stops delivering accurate timing information, the ECU struggles to fire the cylinders in sync. That uneven combustion cycle makes the engine shake, not just at idle but while driving as well. You might feel it through the steering wheel, the pedals, or even the seat, as if the whole car is pulsing. Over time, those vibrations don't just make the ride uncomfortable, they also put extra strain on motor mounts, transmission components, and other parts of the drivetrain. If ignored long enough, the shaking can contribute to additional wear and costly repairs. Occasional vibrations can come from things like bad spark plugs or worn mounts. But if the roughness is paired with misfires, hard starts, or stalling, the crankshaft position sensor becomes a prime suspect. Symptom number 12, intermittent power loss. One of the more frustrating symptoms of a bad crankshaft position sensor is intermittent power loss. You'll be cruising along smoothly when suddenly the engine feels like it's cutting out. Power drops, the car slows, and then just as quickly, it comes back to life. Drivers often describe it as the car surging forward and then dragging, almost like it's hiccuping on the road. This happens because the ECU is getting a weak or inconsistent signal from the crankshaft sensor. Without accurate timing data, fuel and spark delivery are disrupted, and the engine struggles to maintain steady output. Not only is this annoying, it's also a safety hazard, especially if it happens while merging or overtaking. If your car feels like it's losing and regaining power randomly, don't overlook the crankshaft sensor as a possible cause. Symptom number 13, backfiring. A failing crankshaft position sensor can even cause your engine to backfire. When the sensor isn't sending accurate position data, ignition timing can be way off. Fuel that should burn inside the cylinder instead makes its way into the exhaust system. There, it ignites late, producing a loud pop, bang, or crack from the tailpipe. While some car enthusiasts chase backfires for sound, in this case, it's anything but cool. Backfiring signals wasted fuel, poor combustion, and added stress on your catalytic converter and exhaust components. Repeated episodes can even damage the muffler or exhaust pipes. If you hear unexpected pops or bangs while driving, especially alongside rough idle or hesitation, a faulty crankshaft positions sensor could be behind it. Symptom number 14, inconsistent speed or surging. Another symptom of a crankshaft position sensor going bad is inconsistent speed or sudden surging. You might set your foot steadily on the gas pedal, but the car doesn't hold speed the way it should. Instead, it might suddenly surge forward, then lag behind a moment later. This happens because the ECU is getting scrambled timing data, so fuel injection and spark don't line up correctly. On the highway, this can feel like your car is fighting itself. Smooth one minute, jerky the next. In city traffic, it's even more frustrating because it makes the car unpredictable to control. While surging can also come from fuel system issues, when it shows up together with misfires, erratic RPM readings, or stalling, the crankshaft position sensor is often the underlying cause. Symptom number 15, engine won't rev. Past the limit, limp mode. The final symptom on our list is when your engine refuses to rev past a certain RPM, often called limp mode. When the ECU detects unreliable or missing signals from the crankshaft position sensor, it may deliberately restrict engine performance. The goal is to protect the engine from damage by limiting fuel delivery and spark timing. As a driver, you'll notice the car simply won't accelerate past a specific point, no matter how hard you press the gas pedal. Limp mode is a failsafe, and it's a clear sign something is seriously wrong. In many cases, the crankshaft position sensor is the culprit. Ignoring it means living with dangerously reduced performance and risking further damage to the engine and transmission. If your car suddenly feels capped or powerless at higher speeds, don't keep pushing it. Have the code scanned and the crankshaft position sensor tested right away. Now that we've covered the symptoms, the next big question is, how can you test the crankshaft position sensor to know for sure if it's bad? The good news is, you don't need a professional shop to get started. With a basic multimeter or an oscilloscope, you can run a few simple checks at home. First, you'll need to locate the sensor. In most vehicles, it's mounted near the crankshaft itself. That usually means either by the crankshaft pulley at the front of the engine, along the engine block, near the transmission bell housing, or in some models, behind the timing cover. Your owner's manual or a quick search of your vehicle make and model will confirm the exact spot. Once you've found it, testing depends on whether you have a 2-wire sensor or a 3-wire sensor. For a 2-wire sensor, start by disconnecting it and setting your multimeter to resistance mode. Place the meter leads on the sensor's 2 terminals. A healthy reading typically falls between 200 and 1,200 ohms, but always compare against the specs listed in your vehicle's service manual. If the reading is way off, the sensor may be faulty. Next, reconnect it and set your meter to AC voltage. Have someone crank the engine while you watch the display. You should see a small voltage signal, usually between 0.2 and 2 volts AC. No signal means the sensor isn't generating data. For a 3-wire sensor, also called a Hall effect sensor, the process is slightly different. With the ignition on but the engine off, set your meter to DC voltage. Check the power wire and ground. You should see around 5 volts or sometimes 12 volts, depending on your vehicle. Then, check the signal wire while cranking the engine. A healthy sensor will cause the voltage to fluctuate between 0 and 5 volts, or 0 and 12, depending on the system. If you're using an oscilloscope, you'll see this as a steady square wave pattern. If the signal is missing or erratic, the sensor is likely failing. Once you've got your readings, compare them to your vehicle's service manual. If the results are outside the normal range or show no signal, you'll know the sensor is bad and needs replacement. So, how long can you keep driving with a bad crankshaft position sensor? The short answer is, not very long, and it's risky to try. At first, you might just notice hard starts or a little rough idling, and the car still runs. But the crankshaft position sensor is critical for timing fuel injection and spark. When it finally gives out, the engine can stall suddenly, refuse to start, or even cut out while you're in traffic. That makes it not only unreliable, but also dangerous. Some drivers push their luck for a few days or weeks, but every trip risks leaving you stranded. And if the problem causes repeated misfires or unburned fuel in the exhaust, you could also damage expensive parts like the catalytic converter. The bottom line, if you suspect the crankshaft sensor is failing, it's best to address it right away. Treat it as an urgent repair, not something you can put off. The good news is, compared to other engine components, replacing a crankshaft position sensor is usually not the most expensive repair. On average, the total cost falls between $120 and $400, depending on your vehicle. The sensor itself is relatively affordable, typically $50 to $150 for the part. What really changes the price is the labor cost, which can range from about $60 to $250. That depends on how easy it is to access the sensor on your particular engine. In some cars, it's right up front and simple to swap. In others, it's buried behind covers or near the transmission, which takes more time to reach. While you could attempt to replace it yourself, keep in mind that a faulty installation or damaged wiring can create more problems. For most drivers, it's worth having a qualified mechanic handle the job, especially since diagnosing the issue correctly often involves scanning for codes and confirming the sensor is really the problem. In short, while a bad crankshaft position sensor can cause serious symptoms, the cost to replace it is manageable compared to the damage it can cause if left unchecked. So there you have it. The 15 most common symptoms of a bad crankshaft position and sensor, plus how to test it, how long you can safely drive with one, and what it costs to replace. Remember, this little sensor plays a huge role in your engine's health. Ignoring the warning signs can lead to stalling, rough running, or a car that won't start at all. But catching it early means a relatively simple repair instead of thousands in damage to other parts. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button, share it with a friend who's dealing with car trouble, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more guides like this. And when you're done here, make sure to check out another video from my channel. There's plenty more that will save you money and keep your car running longer. Thanks for watching, drive safe, and I'll see you in the next one.